As Australians, we come together on the 25th of April every year to honour the heroism, tenacity and resilience of all Australians who have offered up their lives to defend our right to live in peace and free from tyranny. In particular, on this day, we remember that group of young men who were sent to Gallipoli in April of 1915, where they fought in a campaign designed to open up a permanent and safe seaway to Eastern Europe and hopefully shorten the duration of that brutal war. They charged upwards through the chest-high scrub and thorny bushes into the rugged gullies beyond. They found a strange and foreign place so very far from Australia and home, a place now immortalised as part of Australia's most solemn day of remembrance, a day commemorating the victory of the Aussie spirit, something we proudly call mateship. By late evening of the 25th of April 1915, some 16,000 Anzac troops had landed on that isolated stony beach, about 600 metres long and 20 metres wide, on a remote peninsula on the other side of the world. Tragically, on that first day, over 2,000 young Aussies were killed or wounded. Bodies were crowded on the coarse sand and flat grey stones of what is now known as Anzac Cove. The nightmare beginning of a brutal campaign that lasted for 8.5 months and cost the lives of 8,700 Australians, with a further 19,000 wounded. Many are buried in the 31 cemeteries sprinkled across the peninsula. Many, sadly, have no known grave. Total 60,000 Australians landed on Gallipoli to fight the Turks, the soldiers stalking each other through the yellow flowering gorse and the delicate wildflowers of the craggy hills and gullies. As news of the growing number of our casualties filtered back to Australia, so did the heroism of the Anzacs, from the British, from the French, and not least from the Turks. The shocking news of our casualties, far from weakening this country's resolve at that time, actually served to strengthen it, for the recruiting rate increased, and every single man a volunteer. Something of the desperate nature of the struggle can be understood by the fact that 7 Victoria Crosses were awarded to Australians at Lone Pine. 5 of those VCs were for actions on one day alone, the 9th of August 1915, and the other 2 for actions the following day. These outstanding young Australians created a tradition which since has grown into a burning national pride. The way these Anzacs bore the brunt of the fight in the Dardenelles stirred in Australians everywhere a new feeling of camaraderie, a feeling that matched the way in which the rest of the world began to look at Australia, not just as an offshoot of Britain, but as a young independent nation with a very independent character. And this view of ourselves and the world's view of us continues to this day, thanks to that spirit forged in the fires of Gallipoli. These gallant, cocky, cheerful young soldiers were a new, unknown factor in a very old empire. On the 25th of April 1915, a new side of the Australian character was revealed. The spirit of Anzac was kindled. It flared with a previously unknown and fearsome strength. There was a determination, a drive which swept up from the beaches on the Gallipoli Peninsula as the Anzacs fought the Turk with relentless determination. These colonial boys fought as they lived, boldly, unconventionally, and without fear. They proved that their young country could produce men equal to any in the world. They were the Anzacs. Today in Gallipoli, the bones of the dead are still washed bare when it rains, crumbly white like soft chalk, near old trench lines, or turned up when a farmer's plough cuts a furrow in a battlefield below the hills in springtime. They lie alongside rusty scraps of shrapnel, jagged shards of shell casing, tangled shreds of barbed wire. Their remains intermingled with the dull grey of old lead bullets, in places where larks sing overhead. It must be said that the campaign was a failure, and yet of all the battlefields on which Australians have died, it is the disastrous Gallipoli campaign that has come to symbolise the Australian soldier's courage, doggedness, fighting prowess, humour and mateship. And all these things we now take for granted: freedom, security, opportunity, the privileges of citizenship, we owe to those men who fought, endured, suffered and died for us and their young country. Their deeds and their sacrifices gave us the invincible, the indefinable, the legend of Anzac. Is the flame that burns forevermore in the heart of every true Australian and New Zealander. The statistics of that war are numbing. When the war ended on November the 11th, 1918, of the 324,000 Australians who had served overseas, 61,829 were dead. Over 157,000 wounded, gassed or taken prisoner, and all were volunteers. Reflect for a moment on the effect those numbers would have on the Australia of today. Then remember that in 1918, Australia's total population was less than 5 million. Anzac Day is not a commemoration of the victories or defeats of the Australian Armed Forces at war. Instead, on this day, we simply remember that individual, ordinary Australians were prepared to make personal sacrifices. Many gave their lives for the freedom and quality of life that we enjoy today. Let's never forget those young Australians who fought in strange, far-off places, such as Gallipoli, Flanders, Bullecourt, Beersheba, Tobruk, El Alamein, Malaya, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and those who continue to risk their lives today in Afghanistan. If we treasure our freedom, our way of life, our free speech, our very lives in fact, we will forever need that spirit of Anzac. We must never let it die. We must never forget what that spirit demands, or the lives that are forever shortened in the name of our nation. We must never slacken from our resolve to make this country into one worthy of the memory of those we cherish and honour on this day, Anzac Day.